Hey y'all, so I am doing a video to help you with your assignment this week. If you have not completed your assignments from previous weeks, please make plans to do so, but this assignment is going to tie into what you're learning about with the cardiovascular system. So we're going to talk about calculating heart rate, we're going to talk about how to find your heart rate, we're going to talk about target heart rate zones, and you're going to do some activities to test your heart rate. So the first thing you need to do is you need to make sure you can access the document that's on Classroom. You're going to turn that in to me, but I'm going to kind of go through that document with you right now. So you can print it out or you can have it up on a computer screen while you're kind of watching this, but I want to kind of talk you through it. Your heart rate is a really cool thing because it's an indicator of your health, essentially. Lots of factors can affect your heart rate, such as if you're dehydrated, or if you're exercising, or if you're nervous or anxious, or if you're actually resting, or there's lots of different things that can affect your heart rate, but heart rate is a lot of times an indicator of overall health. And there's many things that can affect it. So there's two good places to find your heart rate on yourself. We've done this in class, so this should be a review for you. You have an artery right here called your carotid artery. So right now, I want you to take two fingers, and I want you to push them very gently into just the side of your neck. And it doesn't really matter what side you choose, but you don't want to use your thumb because you actually have a small pulse in your thumb, and that'll throw off how you are feeling your heart rate. So those two fingers, you want to keep them together, kind of like you're in Hunger Games and you're volunteering as tribute. But you're going to put it on the side of your neck, and that's your carotid artery. Another place you can find it, carotid is typically the best when in regard to exercise. It's the easiest to find, is your radial, and that's going to be on the inside, on your thumb side. Okay, so if this is my thumb side, I'm going to take the same two fingers and I'm just going to kind of gently press right there. Think about where your radius is. Y'all learned about bones recently. You can find it there. It's generally a little bit harder to find because the artery is not quite as big. So after exercise, you might be able to feel it a little more, but you actually might have a little bit of a difficult time. Another way you can hold it like this. It's the same thing. But it's right on the thumb side along your wrist. There's other YouTube videos that are probably better than mine. But you can pick either one of these for this assignment. I recommend the carotid because it's just what we've always learned. And there's many other pulse points in your body. There's one behind your knee. There's one like in your abdomen. There's some crazy ones. Sometimes you can even feel it in your head. But those are going to be the two places I want you to choose from when you're doing this assignment. Now, next, you'll need to develop a resting heart rate. And what that means is that is the lowest heart rate that your heart can function at physiologically. The best time to test your resting heart rate is as soon as you wake up. So you can test it right now if you're sitting, if you haven't been moving, but the best time to test it is you wake up and the first thing you do is check your heart rate before your feet even hit the floor. You check it the same way we just learned how, but what you're going to do is you're going to measure it for 15 seconds, and then you're going to multiply that 15 times 4. Why? There are 60 seconds in a minute. If you divide 60 seconds by 4, you get 15 seconds. Now, you can measure it for a full minute, but it's likely going to change in that minute because as soon as you start checking your heart rate, your heart's going to automatically speed up because those different hormones that are within your body start to make you feel a little anxious because you're actually starting to check your heart rate and your mind is telling you like, what are you doing? So that'll affect your heart rate. So 15 seconds is a nice little window where you check it, you're counting how many times it beats in the 15 seconds, and then you're going to multiply that number times 4 to give you a resting heart rate. And you can do this a couple times. But doing it when you first wake up is going to be the closest to your true resting heart rate. Then once you have a resting heart rate, there's two ways to find your target heart rate zone. So on that sheet, there's the resting heart rate box, and then underneath of that, it says maximum heart rate. That is an indicator, it helps you calculate your target heart rate zone. It doesn't necessarily mean that is the fastest your heart will beat, even though it usually will be around that range. Just because you are, sorry, my dog. Just because you are a certain So once you have your resting heart rate, you're going to calculate your maximum heart rate. This maximum heart rate is an important number because this theoretically is the fastest your heart could beat. It's based off of your age. Your heart could beat faster than that. It's just a formula that's used. But ideally, your heart will likely not go over this number. And the way you calculate that is you take 220 and you subtract your age. So on my clipboard, my resting heart rate when I checked it was 65 beats for a minute. So I did it for 15 seconds and then I multiplied that number and I got 65. My max heart rate, okay, I'm going to take 220, I'm going to subtract my age. I'm 31 and the number that I get is 189. Okay. This first method that you're going to do, so there's two ways to calculate your heart rate. One of them is not as reliable. One of them is the preferred method. I'm going to have you use the preferred method for the assignments, but I wanted to show you both so you could see the difference. So this is called the Fox method, and what you do is you take your maximum heart rate. For me, it was 189, so I'm plugging it in here. And I multiply that number times 0.65. So y'all just learned about decimals. 0.65 means that I'm trying to find 65% of my maximum heart rate. Because keep in mind, my maximum heart rate is the highest my heart could beat. And I'm calculating a range right now of where I want to be to keep my heart strong. That's what target heart rate zones are. When you're exercising, you want your heart to be within this theoretical heartbeat or this theoretical range that you're calculating. So you're going to have a low end and you're going to have a high end. This is the number that I really don't want to get to. That's the maximum number of beats my heart could do, but I want to calculate 65% of that because that means that I'm working at a pace that's going to really help my heart. I'm using 65% of the maximum beats of my heart. And the number I get when I do that is 123. And then, sorry, I'm writing and holding. I'm going to do the same thing, except I'm going to multiply it times 0.85, which is going to be 85%, which is going to be the higher end of my range, and I'm going to get 151. So using the Fox method, when I'm exercising, I want my heart rate to be within 123 and 151 beats per minute. And that range is okay, but it's not quite as accurate as using the Karvonen method or Karvonen method, however you say it, because in the second method, I'm going to actually use my resting heart rate. And your resting heart rate, remember, there's lots of things that can influence your heart rate. The lower your resting heart rate, the better, because that means your heart is not having to work as hard. If your heart's having to work really hard all the time, it's going to lead to heart disease and any types of cardiovascular issues. It's going to be related to that. So the lower your resting heart rate, it is always correlated with better heart health. So if you don't use that in your target heart rate zone formula, then you're missing a whole component of what could be classified as your target heart rate zone. So we're about to see the difference between the two right now. So we calculated, I told you mine was 65, my resting heart rate, and we already calculated my maximum. Remember, that's the 220 minus my age. So what I'm going to calculate now is something called my heart rate reserve, and that's why this one is a little bit different. I'm going to take my maximum and I'm going to subtract my resting. So I'm going to take 189 and subtract 65 from that. And the number that's going to give me is 124. Okay, 124. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug in the number I got here, 124. And I'm going to multiply that number by 0.65, just like I did in the previous equation. I want 65% of that. But once I calculate that number, I'm going to add 65 back into it because 65 is my resting heart rate. So don't be confused here. This is 65% or 0.65 is my decimal. This is actually 65 itself. When I do that, I'm going to get 146. And I think actually I got 145 point something something, but I rounded up. So you do the same thing if you get a decimal. You're going to round up. I'm going to do the same thing down here because that was my lower range. So I can actually go ahead and plug that in. Target heart rate zone, THRZ. 146 is my lower range, but I'm going to do the same thing for here, but I'm going to do 0.85, just like we did in the Fox equation. I'm going to do it with the Carvana method. I want 85% of that heart rate reserve, but then I'm going to go and add back in the 65, okay? And then I'm going to get 170, and I think I actually got 170.4, so I'm going to round down. Remember, 0.5 decimals, you round up. So using the Carvana method, my heart rate zone should be somewhere within here when I'm exercising. If you go back to the Fox method, it was lower, okay? So with the Carvana method, if you've done it correctly, it should be higher. And that is a truer test of where you need your target heart rate to where you want that to be. Because if you're not exercising in this range, theoretically, you're not doing what you should be doing for your heart. You're not doing enough. So that's why this method is so much better. And go back and look at this video again if you need to. The formulas are there for you on the sheet. You should be able just to plug in and do those formulas without any issue, but I wanted to show you and kind of explain why you were plugging in certain numbers and what they meant. Once you have calculated your target heart rate zone, that's what you're going to put where it has the blanks. It says my target heart rate zone, and it says using method 2, which is the Carvana method. You're going to give me that range. And then you're going to actually get to do activities, and you're going to test your heart rate at the very, very end of that activity. When you do the activity, they all tell you how long to do it or how many reps to do it or whatever. You need a stopwatch or something because it's really hard. It's almost impossible, really, to find your heart rate, count the number of beats, and keep track of 15 seconds without having something counting for you. When I did mine, I used my phone, and I just stopwatched it, did it for 15 seconds, and even that was difficult, but it's much more doable than you counting in your head seconds and then counting your beat. It's just not going to work, especially when your heart rate is elevated and you're trying to keep up with the beats. So you have a couple options. You can have a stopwatch, obviously use your phone. You could use your Chromebook. You could, if you have a stopwatch, if you use a watch, or you can have a person. A person would be fine if they wanted to count or keep track for you. You can do it with your parent. I'd love to know how they compare to you with your target heart rate zone. Sorry, parents. But then there's 3 different sections of activities. The first 3 activities, it talks about walking, running, and sprinting until you can't continue. Those are non-negotiable. Those are the ones you have to do. Then you go into the next section and there's some choice activities. So among all of those, I think there's like 8 different choices. You're going to choose 3 of them. 3 that appeal to you or 3 that you choose based off the equipment you have at your house. And then the last 3, they're going to be things that you come up with. It could be anything that we haven't done already. So any other types of things that you really want to try, you're going to, once you complete the activity, as soon as you're done with it, you need to do the 15 second, you need to count, and remember to multiply it times 4. Why do you multiply it times 4? If you said because there's 60 seconds in a minute and you're looking for that minute, then then you answer correctly. Kudos to you. If you didn't and you forgot, that's okay. Now you know. 15 seconds, you multiply it times 4, it gives you 60 seconds. At the very end, it has a learning checklist, so you should be able to answer those things. You don't have to go through and answer each one, but as you go through them, you should say, oh yeah, I remember this, I remember this, I remember this. And then at the very, very end of the sheet, it says record or factors that affect your heart rate. You need to list at least 3. I mentioned some of them at the beginning of the video, but I'd love for you to put factors that you noticed while you were doing these exercises that directly affected your heart rate. So anything that affected your heart rate going up or going down, those would be anything to put. You need a minimum of 3. I hope you found this video helpful. Please email me with questions. I miss you. If you wanted to send me a video of you doing something or a photo of doing something, I love to see all of those things, and I hope you all had a really good spring break. But again, I'm excited to see what y'all come up with for this.